Hey guys, back at Roseanne's kitchen table with Ben Mankiewicz. I am Dave Rubin. That was pretty professional.
Yeah, nice job.
So I wanted to talk to you about something that I think about a lot, and I've sort of had an ongoing debate with a couple of friends with. We're in the political world, we're in the talk world, we give our opinions, we tweet our opinions, we're doing videos, blah, blah, blah. And I sense this thing happening where people are just constantly having their opinions reinforced, only following people on Twitter that they agree with. People are only watching videos of people that they agree with. If you're on the right, you watch Fox all the time, you never see anything on NBC, blah, blah, blah. Not even that they're that different anymore, but that's a whole other topic. And I got into a pretty heavy fight with a friend of mine about some political stuff recently. And then it was making me think, can you really be friends with someone that you're fighting with politically? Now, I think the answer is yes, and I love debate, but I think a lot of people aren't able to do it anymore. I think there's actually something happening because of the internet and all this shit that we're walking around with typing on, that people are starting to really just kind of section off into their own little things and not get debate. What do you think?
There are people,
and you better agree with me.
There are people to blame for this. It's not just that we've become people on the far left and people on the far right. That hasn't happened. And Fox and MSNBC aren't the same. MSNBC's got might have a lot of problems, but they're basically trying to give you information and encouraging you to take in that information. Fox literally doesn't want you to read. I mean, there's a whole network on television designed where they're encouraging you not to read. Don't pick up that paper.
Yeah.
Don't do it. I'll tell you what it says.
Yeah.
Right? So we had this debate on the podcast that Cenk and I, when we started the Young Turks, our goal was to talk about politics half the time and J-Lo's ass half the time, and then we went to war in Iraq and we couldn't do it. So we did this podcast, Old School, where we try and restore J-Lo's ass. Right? So
I don't think it went anywhere.
Yeah. So anyway, we last night when we were doing the show, we discussed you could easily have been friends with people who weren't on your side politically in the 1970s and the 1980s, because there was meaning into the 80s, not far into the 80s. That's when it started to change, because there was meaningful conversation about ideas. Congress was full, not entirely full, of people who had ideas, and they debated those ideas. Now, as we see time and time again, it is not full of people with ideas in any way. And in fact, one whole party doesn't have any ideas. Their whole point is, no, we've had too many ideas. Our idea now is to just stop. Stop.
Wait, real quick. So Congress did get sworn in today,
That's
actually.
Right,
and as I was watching it and I was following along on Twitter, everything, I kept thinking, what a profoundly uninspiring group of people.
That's right. Yeah.
There wasn't anyone that I was like, this guy, and it probably goes to exactly what your point is, so now I'll let you continue.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, it was, in the 1970s, there were real liberals in Congress. George McGovern, Frank Church, Birch Bayh. And these guys argued with conservatives who thought they had some good ideas, right? And conservatives who were like, well, obviously we have to take care of people. Some people need help. We got to do. There's a role for government. It was a debate about what the role of government was going to be. Those guys were completely purged from the Republican Party. They're gone.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the Democratic Party, and really sort of out of, you could say, necessity if you want to be kind, or just cold calculating politics, really abandoned that part of the party. And now we have sort of, a crazy Tea Party, a corporatist right wing, and a slightly less corporatist left wing, left of center. And then there's like, oh no, Elizabeth Warren. You point to like four guys, who sort of are.
Don't forget Bernie Sanders. Everyone wants Bernie Sanders to run.
But they don't have power. I'll be wrapped in 22 seconds.
Yeah.
But the death of combining the 24-hour news cycle with sort of Reagan's aggressive purging of all government regulation and minimizing of government, and that happens with the 24-hour news cycle and the birth of the right-wing echo chamber, all sort of come together at this time, at the exact moment, maybe they contributed to this, with the death of unions in America. And as corrupt as some unions were, right, they had a seat at the table and they argued on behalf of American workers. There's nobody at the table. There's just no one at the table now. And that makes a difference. That's why it was important. And now we're sort of suffering the consequences of that. And part of that is that we've now, with no meaningful ideas being espoused by leaders, we're left to being disciples of Sean Hannity, and I'll only use her on the same sentence as Sean Hannity for the purpose of this conversation, and Rachel Maddow. One's 50 times smarter than the other one.
Right.
But that's what we get, and there's no mixing. But I don't blame people for that. I blame a process and a leadership that is totally broken.
Right. So how do you deal with it in your own
I wouldn't have a
personal
friend
life?
who was a significant right winger. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, really?
I mean, I don't. I say that. I have friends who are Republicans.
Yeah.
They continue to hold on to this. They're not. They're like, oh no, I'm not like them. But you are like them. You're
Right.
Like, you can't. At some point, hey man, you're like Jesse Helms in the 1980s. It was like you're standing in a room with Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond. You can't do it. You got to leave that room.
Right.
You got to say, I agree with you guys on some things, but you're hideous racists.
Yeah,
and I
see
can't
that,
be a party.
and that's the thing about the internet that I think is particularly interesting. So, like for example, with the Middle East stuff, obviously Cenk and I have pretty serious disagreements. He's my boss at the network that I work for, and people always comment in the thing, oh, they must hate each other, they must want to kill each other, and actually we're friends and we play basketball together and we have healthy debates going back and forth about it, and it's like I feel like that's disappearing.
But what did you brought up the Israel and the Palestinian issue and whether there should be a Palestinian state, and that all by itself, that's still an idea. Like when you and Cenk argued, you were literally arguing about ideas.
Yeah.
You didn't argue. He wasn't saying I hate Israel. Cenk
Right.
is saying, no, Israel has a right to exist and they must remain there and we must do all we can to defend them. That said, what do we do about this? And you
Right.
thought that they're being attacked and they have a reason to defend themselves, and I think they have whatever it is, at least it was an idea as opposed to just the kind of argument that we are having in this country.
So how do we get
the
back?
exact argument that Rush Limbaugh has always wanted us to have.
Yeah, he's telling me we got to wrap. But how do we get out of that? Because that's why I'm trying to do the show the way I do it, to have a little more of that discussion and have it about the ideas, not about just the clamoring. But I feel like there's just so little of it.
We need people to talk about ideas, and the only people who are going to do it are Democrats, to really talk about ideas. The only people I thought would, but they're not.
But-
They're not. They've given up. So it's incredible. So I think the way we get out of it is that we don't.
Yeah.
And hopefully things cycle back where that sort of really dynamic, creative leaders with ideas somehow come back into vogue, and we don't get hung up on whether they did or didn't pay their nanny's taxes 25 years ago.
Right, 'cause
Or
that's-
whether, or whether they slept with the nanny, because who gives a shit?
Yeah. Do you guys think we should have more public debates about ideas? And are any of you right-wingers that want to be friends with Ben? If so,
I'm sure there's
somebody.
so many of you we could hang out. I have some Republican friends, and I'm always the liberal they like.
I know you have to believe that.
Yeah.
All right, let us know in the comments right down below.